In the throes of World War II, the conflict witnessed countless battles where tactics and strategies dictated the outcomes of engagements across the European theater. Among these numerous encounters, one of the lesser-known yet pivotal moments unfolded during the late autumn of 1944, as American troops advanced through the war-torn landscape of Western Europe. Fueled by the momentum of previous victories, the Allied forces aimed to break the last strongholds of resistance that dotted Germany's borders. One such location was a seemingly innocuous village that lay ahead, a small, unremarkable hamlet clustering at the foot of a hillside, which intelligence reports had largely deemed abandoned, devoid of significant military presence. However, unbeknownst to the advancing troops, the infrastructure of the village held secrets that could drastically alter the theater of operations. As American scouts approached the village, they reported no immediate signs of enemy combatants. Buildings appeared dilapidated, with most windows shattered and doors hanging off their hinges, an image typical of war's ravages. The tactical assessment within the American command gravitated towards a straightforward approach: consolidate their forces swiftly and move through the village with minimal engagement, advancing to more strategic objectives that lay beyond. The chain of command, resting upon generals in far-off command centers, remained confident, despite instances of trouble in the surrounding regions. Unbeknownst to them, Germany's military had adapted, incorporating unique defensive measures that involved an extensive network of hidden tunnels running beneath the village, allowing German forces to launch surprise attacks, maintain secure communication, and execute strategic retreats when necessary. These tunnels were not just remnants of ancient times. They had been revamped and expanded during the Nazi regime, designed to support troops and facilitate clandestine movements across the landscape. Layered with reinforced concrete, these underground pathways were equipped with supplies, munitions, and even makeshift medical facilities. As American forces entered the perimeter of the village, they were oblivious to these vital elements that provided the German defenders with an uncanny advantage. Instead, the Americans moved forward based upon assurances secured through reconnaissance, chiefly relying on aerial photography that indicated no considerable troop concentrations. This reliance on technological superiority proved a critical misstep. As soldiers streamed into the village in squads, the initial fervor of capturing the area soon descended into chaos. Well-placed German snipers, who had naturally blended into the desolate background, opened fire from the upper floors of crumbling buildings. The familiar crack of bullets echoing through the streets caused panic among infantry units, swiftly shattering the sense of security the Americans had once held. American troops, trained to expect enemy encounters on the battlefield, were unprepared for the ferocity and cunning of the engagement. Just as they fortified positions and sought cover, the hidden tunnels became the stage for German reinforcements, allowing troops to maneuver quickly and efficiently around flanking maneuvers. Communication among American units broke down amidst the confusion, leading to disarray in operations. They were now faced with a battle for survival rather than a calculated advance. The unexpected and intense German resistance prompted the American command to adjust their tactical approach, but the ensuing processes became riddled with miscommunications and altered agendas. A call for artillery support came in too late, with artillery shells raining down indiscriminately. There was little opportunity for targeted strikes without risking American lives or collateral damage to the village itself. As a result, further confusion ensued as command units struggled to find a balance between offensive operations and the welfare of troops trapped in untenable positions. In close-quarters combat, soldiers relying on traditional infantry tactics found themselves constrained, grappling with the stark reality of urban warfare that was far more complicated and unpredictable. Town alleys turned into a deadly chess game, with players who understood their surroundings better than the foreign invaders. Casualties rose, creating further tension within the ranks. The human cost weighed heavily on young soldiers, who were thrust into perilous conditions with little preparation for the devastation that war could bring. Countless brothers and sons fell that day, grappling with fear, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Each life lost added another layer to the psychological toll of battle. These dynamics fostered moments of valor, as many soldiers exhibited acts of incredible bravery, risking everything to save comrades pinned down or wounded in the throes of combat. Amidst the chaos, stories emerged of individual resilience and courage, often overshadowed by the overarching narrative of strategic failures. As the battle waged through the day, the American troops discovered, through desperate encounters, some remnants of the underground passages, albeit poorly positioned. Reports from soldiers who narrowly escaped the deadly sniper fire attested to the existence of tunnels, but these were anecdotal at best. The reliance on superior numbers and firepower began fading under the reality that German defenses were not merely crumbling remnants to outlast, but a resilient network consciously designed to outmaneuver and thwart American advances. While American artillery rang through the passages, the Germans tasked with defending this village maintained an advantage by retreating into the tunnels, regrouping, and continuing their assault with renewed vigor after artillery returns ceased. In a display of tactical acumen against overwhelming odds, German forces utilized the tunnels to launch surprise counterattacks, resulting in a crushing blow to American morale. The newly devised tactics showcased a mastery of defensive warfare, transitioning smoothly from offensive to defensive strategies. Knowledge of the terrain and veteran soldiers exploited the Americans' underestimation to assert dominance in an evolving battlefield. As dusk settled and the last remnants of daylight faded, the American forces found themselves entangled in a nightmare, beset with trauma and loss. Leaders gazed upon the hostile landscape, tormented by the decisions made and the lives irrevocably altered in the fray. As battle lines shifted and chaos reigned supreme, the initial tactical hope for a smooth advance towards critical objectives crumbled before the indomitable will of the defenders, brought to life by the stony hearts of a beleaguered nation. The interplay of human resilience, determination, and the exhaustion of war set against the backdrop of a conflict that was far from over became pivotal. This engagement depicted not just a flashpoint within a larger war, but illuminated the complex tapestry of human experiences and emotions, writhing amidst the fury of 20th-century warfare. The reality of combat transformed many soldiers from mere participants into lifelong witnesses of the destructive power of ideologies, clashing, shaping narratives that would echo far beyond the confines of this German village. In the end, they would reflect not only on the fog of war, but on their role within a greater saga, one marked by the enduring reverberations of fire, trauma, courage, and above all, sacrifice. The village at the heart of this conflict, seemingly desolate from the surface yet riddled with subterranean networks, proved a formidable fortress for the beleaguered German forces. Reveling in the advantages afforded by the intricacies of their own terrain, German commanders displayed an astute understanding of asymmetric warfare, capitalizing on the belief that they faced a ramshackle defense. American intelligence had considerably underestimated the complexity of the village's layout, failing to perceive that the very structure they were about to invade was compounded by an elaborate system of tunnels, a remnant of both historical architecture and wartime ingenuity. These tunnels, once used for purposes of trade and transport, had been repurposed into a complex maze designed for elaborate military operations, complete with ammunition depots and sleeping quarters, enabling its defenders to arrange themselves stealthily within its shadowed depths. As American troops began their multi-pronged assault, led by a battalion that had already amassed considerable success while breaking through other defensive lines, they encountered fierce resistance emanating from the positioning of German soldiers who lay in wait within the tunnels. Commanding officers known for their strategic foresight, such as Colonel Lewis, quickly recognized that their approach was met with stronger opposition than anticipated. The initial barrage aimed to demoralize and displace the enemy had momentarily succeeded in drawing fire from the village, but it was not long until the defenders launched their cunning counteroffensive, emerging unexpectedly from hidden passageways to engage the Americans in close quarters. The impact of surprise was shattering, further complicating the American advance and leading to miscommunication and panic among leaders and troops. Desperation started to creep into the ranks of American soldiers as they fought valiantly but ineffectively against a well-prepared adversary. Attempts to coordinate air support were stifled, as thick smoke from artillery fire obstructed visibility. The soldiers quickly learned that the very technology that had bolstered their position on numerous fronts could become a liability without proper reconnaissance and intelligence, leaving them at the mercy of their adversaries. Constant eruptions of explosive rounds rattled them, but it was the psychological toll, the constant sense of being hunted within a fortified trap, that proved corrosive to morale. Simple efforts at relocation or regrouping on the battlefield became fraught with risk, as the enemy's advantage in maneuverability allowed them to strike swiftly before American troops could reorient. The Americans, now drawing heavily from their supply lines, faced the added challenge of dwindling resources. The High Command had envisaged a swift and decisive victory, with rapid progress through the region facilitating the sustainment of their operations. However, every requisition became an exercise in futility. Munitions and medical supplies, once viewed as abundant, experienced significant depletion as life-threatening injuries piled up in the wake of relentless skirmishes. The severity of the conflict quickly morphed from a tactical battleground to a desperate humanitarian crisis, as medics struggled to treat the wounded amid the chaos. Key injuries fell among the ranks, notably among sergeants leading squads into the brunt of combat. The loss of competent leadership directly magnified the pandemonium and further fractured their lines, creating a logistical nightmare for remaining commanders who desperately sought to maintain cohesion and morale. Not passing for a mere clash of arms, this confrontation reverberated through the very essence of soldierly identities, reshaping friendships and allyship into bonds forged in the fires of adversity. The friendships that had formed amidst the camaraderie of prior battles began to fray under duress. Anxiety haunted the ranks, and fragility clawed at the very hopes they had relied upon. This deeply entrenched tension culminated in the striking realization among soldiers that their human element could infuse loss beyond the physical, but rather within the conceptual understanding of their mission in this war. Effectively, the idyllic representation of glory was shattered, replaced with the harsh truth of survival that now dictated their very being, forcing them to reckon with the traits of bravery and cowardice tangled irrevocably together in the theater of war. Fateful decisions compounded these dilemmas when commanders convened under the flickering glow of dim lanterns, weighing the potential costs of renewed attacks against the pressing demands of regrouping and seeking strategic advantages in ammunition usage. The atmosphere was suffused with darkness, both literal and metaphorical, as emotions ran high and optimism waned. The general understanding was that pulling back and reassessing could yield dividends. However, vacillation was perceived as weakness and could reverberate through their chains of command, leading to a loss of faith amongst their ranks. The need to assert control became paramount, driving leaders to push their units into further engagements, emboldened by the conviction that victory lay only one bold maneuver away. Similarly, the crippling dread of failure merely fortified their resolve, resulting in further reckless abandon in combat. As night cloaked the landscape, the cycle of offensive and defensive war continued, amplified by the eerie glow of flares that illuminated the clash of shadows dancing across the battlefield. The American forces, torn between periods of suicidal bravery and debilitating fear induced by the intense conflict, unwittingly became embroiled not in a mere occupation of territory, but in an existential promotion of their very tenets as soldiers, a reminder of the gravity and permanence of their actions. Tactically, the conflicts began to follow a discernible pattern. Instead of pressing advantage, they slowly engaged in futile conservation of efforts. What had begun as a rushing tide of assault transformed into an agonizing slog steeped in uncertainty, mortal fatigue, and surprise assaults unfolding around every corner, leading to harrowing skirmishes as the German defenders exploited the psychological warfare waged alongside the physical one. As grief washed over them with each fallen brother, every soul lost became a piercing reminder of the nature of their commitment. Raking their memories in search of hope, American soldiers clung to the idealistic image of home, distant yet lingering as a siren call. This haunting juxtaposition between the warmth of memories and the harshness of combat engaged them in rhythmic introspection, the fragility of life laid bare when faced with the ferocity of battle. Each soldier navigated their reaction uniquely. While some withdrew into silence, burying their emotions, others articulated their fears amidst their surviving comrades, exchanging shared tales of valor and pain, echoing sentiments of hope through the scars left behind by the violence around them. Ultimately, the culmination of these experiences would not just signal a momentary setback, but resonate through the annals of military history, shaping the courses of future engagements and redefining the very essence of human warfare. As voices wavering in trepidation rehearsed the fabric of their reality, this German village became synonymous with the trials and tribulations of a generation, a testament to the enduring conflict etched on the hearts and minds of those fighting. The impact of tactics, choices, and human emotion would linger, forging connections previously unfathomable while illuminating the crucibles that defined their existence. To understand the plights faced in this chapter of history is to honor the complexity of warfare itself, where strategy meets visceral humanity amid devastation. In reflecting on such a chronicle, one cannot help but consider the profound sacrifices that accompany warfare that spiral far beyond the conventional understanding of victory or defeat. If this compelling narrative compels you to seek a deeper exploration of the human experiences wrapped within the intricate folds of war, consider subscribing to our ongoing documentary journey and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Each story unfolds another layer of understanding of our past as we grapple with the echoes of conflict reverberating through every aspect of humanity. As the American troops advanced towards the seemingly abandoned German village, an undercurrent of strategic optimism permeated the ranks. Intelligence reports had indicated minimal defensive positions, suggesting a smooth route towards their objectives. Yet, unbeknownst to the soldiers, this unassuming village concealed a labyrinth of hidden tunnels, remnants of a once strong German fortification system that would soon shift the balance of power dramatically in this unforeseen confrontation. The village, nestled within a picturesque landscape and appearing tranquil, belied the intricate network of subterranean passages designed to shield German troops from aerial bombardment and ground assaults alike. These tunnels formed the backbone of an elaborate defensive strategy, allowing for rapid troop movements and the ambush of unsuspecting enemies. As the first patrol units entered the village, the initial stillness was abruptly shattered. Sniper fire erupted from concealed positions, and soldiers were caught off guard as they attempted to maneuver through narrow streets lined with quaint, though ominously silent, homes. The enemy, strategically positioned within the tunnel system, had the element of surprise firmly in their hands. American forces found themselves not preparing for a simple reconnaissance mission, but rather entangled in a fierce fight against a constantly shifting enemy that could strike and vanish almost instantaneously. The crucial tedium of heavy fighting wore on the men's morale. Their earlier camaraderie and shared hopes now clashed violently with the stark reality of death, hidden within the very walls they sought to liberate. Realizing that their advance had been compromised, the commanding officer, Major Harrison, made a calculated decision to regroup and reassess their tactics. Buildings that had once seemed like mere shelter now became crucial points for providing cover and forming makeshift defensive perimeters. The initial plan to occupy the village rapidly transitioned into a staggered assault aimed at flushing out enemy combatants while also securing vital access points. Communication was vital at this juncture. The troops utilized radio equipment to relay information back to higher command, requesting artillery support to target suspected tunnel entrances. This operational precision was a hallmark of American military doctrine, the infusion of technology and effective communication into traditional warfare. But artillery barrages carried their own risks. The possibility of collateral damage loomed large, weighed heavily upon Major Harrison's conscience. Analyzing the crisscrossing patterns of movement, He coordinated a more specialized approach, involving the deployment of light infantry with specialized training in urban warfare. These soldiers were equipped to penetrate the densely packed structures and identify entrances to the tunnel system, minimizing civilian casualties while simultaneously pursuing enemy troops utilizing the complex network below. Each unit would methodically clear buildings, working as a cohesive team, acutely aware of the immediate dangers within the shadows. The harsh sounds of battle, the ear-splitting crack of gunfire and the resounding explosions were relentless reminders of the stakes involved. Fear melded with determination as each soldier ventured forth, the weight of their comrades resting squarely upon their shoulders. As darkness began to fall, it became apparent that the initial underestimation of the village's defenses had catastrophic implications. Soldiers, once buoyed by ideals of quick victory, now faced the gritty reality of urban warfare, where every block was a potential ambush. Command structures faltered slightly under the brunt of confusion, as communication lines were strained by the volume of information being exchanged. The complexity of urban combat necessitated faultless logistics. Supplies began diminishing, exacerbating an already tenuous situation. Ammunition and medical provisions were dwindling, and with each passing hour, the moral weight of losses mounted on the hearts of those still standing. Despite the ongoing chaos, moments of profound humanity emerged amidst violence. Times of respite allowed for brief reflection, as soldiers utilized stolen moments to honor fallen comrades, exchanging stories of bravery and laughter to keep the spirit alive. The stark contrast of camaraderie and impending dread punctuated their experiences, forming a duality that reflected the human condition under extraordinary pressure. Picture the quiet guy from Iowa, who, just days before, was lamenting over a lost love, now forging bonds in the heat of combat with a rifle raised and heart-pounding, pushing onwards so that others might live to see another day. Unfortunately, the increasing toll of the hidden tunnel system soon manifested through sustained firefights, leading to staggering casualties on both sides. As dawn broke on the second day, Major Harrison surveyed what remained of his battalion, now reduced significantly in numbers. At this critical juncture, the decision loomed over him: to allocate additional resources for an all-out offensive, or to hold back, preserving what few men remained for a more strategic operation. Tension hung in the air like the dust settling following gunfire, each moment stretching interminably. Gathering his remaining officers, Major Harrison deliberated over the options. Sending a larger force in an attempt to flush out remaining enemy combatants hidden within the tunnels posed high risks, while a more subdued approach might permit intelligence gathering and safe extraction of his men. After weighing the brutality of carrying on with bloody chaos against preserving lives and waiting for reinforcements, his decision veered towards caution. A temporary retreat to reevaluate seemed the only logical path, adopting eating time as a weapon for psychological warfare while preparing for the inevitable counteroffensive. As American troops tactically withdrew, they laid the groundwork for future attacks. Intelligence gleaned during the fighting would prove invaluable. Maps were drawn based on observations made by searching for hidden entrances to the tunnel networks, combined with testimonies from local civilians, many of whom lived under the shadow of warfare for far too long. Their experiences, shared over coffee and simple meals, illuminated the thick fog that had enshrouded combatants, revealing the intricacies of living in a war zone where trust was as scarce as safety. The struggles endured by soldiers were intertwined with the deep-rooted communal pain felt by the village's inhabitants, where children watched families torn apart in despair. Thus, the hidden tunnels beneath the village became a stark reminder of the devastating edge of total war, where strategies clashed with human lives in unforeseen ways that transformed landscapes and destinies on both sides. Major Harrison's temporary setback would only ignite the flames of future engagements, as the competing layers of strategy, human cost, emotional ties, and historical legacy laid the groundwork for an all-too-familiar precedent in warfare, one defined by adaptability and resilience amidst relentless adversity that echoes through the ages. In the coming days, the resources summoned to finish what had begun were not just military might. They would pull together the collective memory of sacrifice, hope, and retribution that resides in each heart. This German village would remain etched in their stories, forever changing the narratives of those who once fought over its smoldering ruins, providing a haunting testament to the price of war, an amalgamation of tunnels and tribulations that would forever bind them. Amidst the rubble, the delicate embroidery of humanity would emerge anew, promising that neither history nor its ghosts would be easily forgotten. Amidst the ruins of the German village, the sheer weight of history clung to the air like the acrid smell of smoke from the smoldering buildings. The American troops, now acutely aware of the intricacies wrought by the hidden tunnel network, began to reevaluate their entire approach to combat in this region. Intelligence previously gathered, which seemed somewhat abstract before the discovery of the tunnels, now held profound significance. Maps marked with pinpointed entrances and exits established a dynamic framework that informed the flow of American tactics in the battlefield. No longer would they approach the village as an empty shell waiting to be conquered. It was now a living organism with a subterranean heartbeat, capable of undermining their operations at any moment. The tactical adjustments began at dawn, as the first rays of sunlight spilled across the devastated landscape. Major Harrison found himself directing a team of engineers and scouts, charged with the critical task of sealing tunnel entrances. As mortar and concrete were mixed, the soldiers were compelled to reflect on the tactical depth of urban warfare, now augmented by the deceptive refuge provided by the tunnels. The engineers worked methodically, erecting barricades and laying explosives in strategic comparison to potential enemy movement, while the soldiers stood guard, their senses heightened, training them on every sound, every flicker of movement that might suggest hidden adversaries. A sense of urgency permeated the air. Alongside tactical adaptations, the soldiers also recognized a psychological endeavor was at hand. The German villagers, a mix of weary survivors and reluctant witnesses to the conflict, became points of focus for information gathering. When possible, officers attempted to establish rapport with the local populace, who held vital knowledge of the underground layout that could potentially alter the outcome of skirmishes. Translated conversations between American soldiers and German villagers revealed a complex interplay of fear and hope. To some locals, the American presence signified liberation from tyranny, while for others, it was a revisitation of trauma, an unwelcome reminder of past violence echoing through their alleyways. Critical decisions were made within command tent flaps, where Major Harrison and his fellow commanders wrestled with the broader implications of the ongoing battle. They weighed the costs of an immediate assault against the wisdom of reconsolidating their forces in a more advantageous position. The gamble of entering the tunnels was particularly daunting. Singular areas of uncertainty could transform into potential traps, and as soldiers had learned through the experience of war, overconfidence could precipitate catastrophic consequences. A thorough reconnaissance plan was set, involving snipers stationed strategically to survey the village outskirts, scouts equipped to venture into the network slowly and carefully. Regardless of these meticulous plans, the fear of ambush loomed large. Regular patrols were undertaken, but each troop movement born from the command tent was framed by tension. The psychological toll of warfare permeated both sides. American soldiers were acutely aware of the potential for unexpected conflict erupting from the dimly lit recesses below them, while the German soldiers pent up in the tunnels, fighting for their homeland, harnessed an undeterred resolve spurred by a mix of desperation and loyalty. Weeks passed where minor skirmishes erupted frequently, rapidly morphing into broader engagements due to the interconnected maze of tunnels. Emerging from the darkness, German forces executed hit-and-run tactics, capitalizing on their knowledge of the tunnel roads, a home advantage that allowed them fluidity and deception. In contrast, American forces had to craft evolving strategies for pursuit. That balance of advance and retreat often turned into brutal standoffs, where attrition became the grave consequence of ground warfare. Battles juxtaposed moments of breathless combat against stretched hours of uncertainty, under the blazing sun or cold moonlit skies. Each new day brought a grim reality. The humanitarian impact grew increasingly pronounced. Hospitals were strained, treated by a skeleton crew of medics overwhelmed by incoming casualties from both sides. Soldiers returning from combat bore not only the physical scars, but also the emotional weight of witnessing fellow soldiers fall. The psychological aftershocks of war were extended because the battle for the village morphed into an extended campaign. Heroes were forged through acts adrift in chaos, and an unshakable camaraderie creased into their bond. Silent understandings brewed in shared losses that painted the backdrops of an unorthodox war. It is within these chaotic hours that the dichotomy of warfare became painfully clear. What strategies may succeed on paper often failed in execution, and tactical ingenuity fell prey to the unforgiving reality of the human condition. The tunnels that once felt like a tactical advantage to the Germans had become a crossfire of desperation, leading to uncontrolled dynamics between soldiers who fought, not just to survive the day, but defend ideals that felt tenuous at best. Logistical concerns also grew stakes. Local supply chains, already burdened, flourished under the demand for resources from both armies. The diminishing availability of food, clean water, and adequate medical supplies turned the battlefield into a consuming entity, eating away at both civilian morale and military tenacity. The American unit found itself increasingly reliant on logistical reinforcements, while soldiers often scavenged from derelict buildings for remnants that could sustain them another day. Those anxious moments spent in hushed conversations while rifling through abandoned homes stoked the urge to remember lives once lived amidst these bombarded surroundings. As the tales of American soldiers intertwined with the history of this village, wherein heartbreak was felt on both sides. Strategically, as each tactical phase turned recursive, with skirmishes perpetually rallying, intelligence evolved into an informal communication network embedded in unthinkable trauma. Surviving villagers filed fleeting moments of information. Against all odds, they disclosed and refined details that would eventually help American forces devise tactics to eventually flush out entrenched resistance. This profound human dimension epitomized the legacy of the village as a testament not just of conflict, but of shared resilience, woven through narratives of destruction, survival, and reconciliation amid turmoil, illustrating both the gravity and futility of their struggles. As the sun began to set behind the horizon, a collective breath fell over the soldiers, still filled with anticipation, as they prepared for one last major offensive to reclaim the village. Spice lit with resolve. No longer mere combatants battling over land, each soldier now embodied stories of valor and sacrifice, complexities intertwining the very essence of what it meant to defend a cause. What was at stake was no longer just the village, but a symbolic fight, a crucible testing the limits of humanity amidst the violence of war. As night cloaked the village, an air of uncertainty mingled with the palpable tension among the American troops, stationed just beyond the outskirts. The commanders had been poring over maps and reports throughout the long day, piecing together a strategic plan that would compensate for vital intelligence gaps. They faced an unseen enemy, one that had entrenched itself deep within the shadows of the village, a network of hidden tunnels that had allowed German soldiers to navigate the distorted urban landscape undetected, striking their foes mercilessly and then disappearing like phantoms into the labyrinthine paths beneath. American intelligence had failed to grasp the full extent of the tunnel system, which included not only firefights with well-camouflaged foes, but also a hidden cache of supplies that fortified German fighting capabilities. This oversight would soon prove to be critical. Facing the reality of the situation, Major Thomas Hale, a battle-hardened leader with years of tactical experience, knew that the success of the impending assault depended greatly on two foundational factors: careful planning and surprise. In the early hours before dawn, the order for a coordinated attack was crafted, relying on the strengths of each platoon to create a multifaceted approach. The men were split into three primary units, tasked with different objectives that aimed to isolate and eliminate the enemy while minimizing American casualties. As they readied themselves, the echoes of distant artillery fire represented both reassurance and despair. The narrative of the broader war waging on, overshadowing their localized plight. The first unit, a squadron of infantrymen, would advance through the main thoroughfare of the village, carefully leveraging the cover of darkness. Their goal was to draw the German defenders' fire, pinning them down, and eliminating key positions identified through careful assessments of enemy movements. The second unit would flank from the north, using the surrounding woods as a screen. Equipped with machine guns and grenades, these men understood their role as essential to disrupting any planned counterattacks from the entrenched enemy. Meanwhile, the third unit was tasked with reconnaissance and demolition, pinpointing areas where barricades existed and likely hidden entrances to the tunnels could be, using methodical reconnaissance paired with explosives, a necessity to gain control. This strategic triad reflected a unified commitment to success, igniting the hearts of American soldiers who had scrapped for every inch of ground won. As dawn broke, emboldened by adrenaline and determination, the Americans launched their offensive. The crack of rifle fire intermingled with the sporadic thump of grenades, creating a cacophony that filled the air, starkly contrasting the eerie silence that had dominated the previous night. Progress was initially met with echoes of resolve as American forces pushed into the village, quickly gaining ground across the rubble-strewn streets. However, the deeper they pressed into the village, the more sinister the environment became. Every step forward was fraught with the knowledge that, hidden in the dark, shaped by soil and time, lay a complex network that could swiftly turn the tide. Major Hale had anticipated ambushes, yet as they traversed the twisting alleyways, the German defenders unleashed a torrent of fire from concealed positions. The Americans soon found themselves in a quagmire, engulfed in crossfire that rattled morale. Although an American soldier could rattle off coordinates of a target, the concealed ramifications of the tunnels created an enemy against which their skills were inadequate. The realization struck hard. A hasty reliance on conventional engagements failed to penetrate the German defenses within the tunnel-ridden landscape. As the bullets whipped through the air, escaping cries and anguish filled their hearts with despair. Faced with the dire consequences of their tactics, Major Hale quickly altered the approach. He called for a regrouping of the first unit, ordering them to commandeer sheer resolve for intensive fire support while assessing tunnel openings. His tactical shift leaned heavily on intelligence from local villagers, who, witnessing the ferocity of the battle, gestured discreetly towards the structures that concealed entrances to the subterranean labyrinth. Using explosives as a breaching tool, the third unit made an initial foray. Here, the dynamics of warfare shifted dramatically. The Americans were no longer mere soldiers filling spaces on the battlefield, but combat engineers forced to adapt rapidly to an evolving conflict. Beneath the surface, a darkness enveloped them, a dank, damp environment rife with echoes of despair, as they discovered remnants of past battles, abandoned weapons, and signs of life that had once echoed through these tunnels. The remnants were haunting fragments of existence within the core of a community torn from its foundations. Though unprepared for the dim environment and staleness of air, emboldened by a sense of purpose, they moved through with urgency. Outside, warfare raged on, but within these tunnels, a haunting silence took grip, a stark juxtaposition to the chaos erupting above. American soldiers systematically neutralized German combatants, hiding within the claustrophobic confines, employing flashbangs to instill confusion before engaging in close-quarters combat. With sweat lining their brows and hearts racing, they battled not just against a physical enemy, but the specter of fear that clawed at their resolve. The underground conflict climaxed when a crucial flicker of a flashlight illuminated a makeshift command center laden with maps and unspent ammunition, where a newly minted officer, a German lieutenant, was desperately trying to regain control over his unit. The Americans seized the moment. A fierce struggle ensued, resulting in hand-to-hand combat that reflected not only the physical struggle for survival, but also the emotional complexity of war. As shots rang out, echoing off the earthen walls, the implications of each death weighed heavily on the shoulders of those involved. Every redemptive act merged with despair. The soldiers knew they were fighting not just for victory, but for lives that had been irrevocably altered, shackled by the brutality of conflict. As the sunlight filtered through the stony chasms, illuminating the war-torn ruins above, the American unit emerged victorious from the tunnels. However, the cost of that victory manifested deeply in their souls, as they were left to carry the intimate weight of horror witnessed in dim, claustrophobic corridors. Outside, sounds of mourning filled the air, both sides suffering dearly for territory that seemed less worth the price paid. The village bore testament to pain interwoven with the fabric of human existence, a painful reminder of the sacrifice wrought amid destruction. In the aftermath, the American troops, once certain of their just cause, found themselves reflecting upon the complexities of war and what it meant to conquer not just an enemy, but the very nature of conflict itself. As Major Hale catalogued the events for higher command, his mind lingered on the intersection between victory and desolation. The battle had not merely faced the German soldiers, it had challenged the very humanity of those sent to fight. As history would reflect upon this village, the courage of soldiers flowed deeply intertwined with the tragic narrative of lives altered forever beneath the weight of war's relentless tempo. Each strategy and tactical maneuver meant far more than tactical gain. It ushered in a poignancy that reshaped the landscape of warfare, a compelling reminder that the true cost of conflict often eclipses the boundaries of victory itself. In the aftermath of the battle, the echoes of gunfire reverberated through the minds of soldiers long after the dust had settled. The story of this village becomes a powerful tapestry, woven from threads of sacrifice, loss, and resilience. Living memories of those who endured the haunting reality of war compel viewers to ponder deeper meanings behind the struggles depicted during these tumultuous times. As we delve further into the historical complexities that grease the gears of life at war, we invite our viewers to pursue that endeavor of thought alongside us. What narratives would you like us to explore? Join our community by subscribing and share your suggestions for future topics. We would love to continue this journey into the human experience of the Second World War together. As American troops advanced cautiously toward the German village, they carried with them a mix of apprehension and determination, fueled by the fervent belief that they were approaching an empty stronghold. Initial reconnaissance reports had suggested that the area was relatively devoid of spirit, a mere ghost town relinquished by its defenders. The evidence of earlier skirmishes had adorned the landscape like leaves scattered in the autumn breeze, hinting at previous conflicts that had once reddened the ground with blood. What the American commanders had underestimated, however, was the village's hidden network of tunnels, a clandestine labyrinth that would soon complicate their mission and inflict considerable casualties. The Germans, strategic in their foresight, had constructed these tunnels not just for the sake of refuge, but as a formidable shelter for surprise attacks, a tactical maneuver instilled within the very fabric of their defense. Major Hale and his battalion had received intelligence that treatment of the village's population was largely subdued. As they breached the initial perimeter of the village, it became evident that the sporadic fire coming from various roofs and alleyways was merely a facade, intended to mislead and disorient. Shells exploded near the edges of the barricaded roads, each round a gear in the machine of warfare, turning with the weight of men's lives on its shoulders. Combat engineers began the painstaking task of clearing debris, a process that consumed valuable time in an operation hinged on speed and surprise. The blood-stained streets became a canvas marking the fervor of desperation. Every building served as a potential sniper perch. Every corner held the specter of an unseen man, waiting to disrupt the American advance. It was here that simple movements led to disaster. An open door revealing a flash of rifle fire proved fatal for Corporal Jensen, a promising young soldier whose eager optimism had imbued him with urgency. This tragedy showcased the inescapable truth lurking beneath the lives of soldiers. War never paid heed to the valiant or the fresh-faced. The air, filled with acrid smoke and screams, echoed against the walls of centuries-old structures, binding the soldiers together in a collective experience of anguish and valor. Command decisions layered upon tactical perspectives began to fracture under pressure. Major Hale found himself re-evaluating his approaches, tossing aside initial plans while grappling with the unpredictable nature of combat. The airwaves buzzed with comms chatter. A vivid manifestation of chaos lay ahead, laden with uncertainty that seeped into the crevices of his mind. He could practically feel the weight of responsibility crushing upon his shoulders. In the swell of conflict, the sheer horror of the human experience struck deep. Each soldier faced agonizing choices as they moved through the terrain, grappling with the fear instilled by uncertainty. Among these men was Private Adams, a raw recruit who had spent months training in different terrains, only to find himself now straining against the reality of combat. His untrained hands trembled as he clutched his rifle, breaths coming in short gasps as he navigated newly formed alliances with fellow soldiers, men grappling with their mortality. With one moment, a headshot silenced a teammate beside him. The next moment, Adams pushed on, urgency spilling into dread as he advanced through the enemy's fire. Meanwhile, Major Hale issued directives to utilize suppressive fire in order to advance toward the suspected tunnel entrances. Marking the areas on his map where the reports suggested access points, he coordinated with engineers to create designated pathways for assault troops to breach the underground sanctuaries that the Germans had built to ensure survival amid the chaos. The entire operation, however, danced precariously on the string of time. Each moment that passed only served as a reminder of their vulnerability, of the enemy awaiting their arrival with bated breath. As the hours dragged on, the realization set in. Time was precious, yet still slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. As dusk approached, Hale ordered a full-scale assault aimed at flushing out whatever remnants of the German presence still lingered. The air filled with artillery fire, reminiscent of a tempest unleashed upon an unsuspecting shore, as the American troops pressed their advance against the crumbling facade of the village, employing the remaining arsenal of light infantry tactics. In that moment, tactics merged with instinct, a visceral response honed through training and hardened by experience. The detonations served a dual purpose: to dislodge enemy combatants, as well as shatter the structural integrity of the tunnels that lay below. As explosives rocked the ground beneath their feet, the conflict bore an unfolding reality, one that painted the streets with vivid strokes of destruction and despair. Yet despite their efforts, pockets of resistance remained. German soldiers, initially believed to be in retreat, surged from the shadows, emerging from the depths of the tunnels to unleash a final counterattack. Caught off guard, the Americans struggled to regroup, demonstrating how swiftly the delicately arranged pieces of warfare could unravel. As gunfire erupted and echoes bounced through the narrow streets, Major Hale faced a crossroads, a moment where chaos collided with command. He opted to implement a tactical fallback, drawing troops into flanking positions. The rugged buildings provided cover while they fell back under renewed fire. While they exerted pressure on the beleaguered German forces, the ground remained saturated with an ever-present haze of tension and trepidation. Each explosion that capped the advance within the village lamented the young lives spent in desperate resistance and the fragility of humanity laid bare. The final push toward the heart of the tunnels revealed ghastly secrets concealed within. As they descended, the dim yet penetrating light revealed walls littered with the remnants of war, a harrowing sculpture highlighting the decisions of men entwined in a struggle for survival. Upon uncovering the net of tunnels, Major Hale's contingent realized the greater tactical landscape had shifted. They were not merely fighting an enemy, but the iniquitous implications of a conflict that extended far beyond mere territory. Each confrontation solemnly echoed the struggle faced by all, the harsh realities of destruction and resilience, committing countless young men to a war that reshaped boundaries of life and death. The veil of hope, steeped amidst the ashes of despair, offered true testament of human spirit against the backdrop of devastation. The aftermath would weigh heavily on both sides. Each soldier would carry the stories of valor and sacrifice, while the soil of that village transformed into a poignant cemetery of humanity's darkest hour. The consequences of their actions unfolded into a bleak tapestry, weaving intricate patterns of pain, loss, and the lingering shadows of those who fought valiantly for a cause often lost in the fog of war. The village, forever changed in its essence, served as a chilling reminder of the often overlooked complexities of engagement in battle. Even as victory was declared, the human price rendered translates to a haunting legacy of adversity that would echo throughout time. As the American forces pressed deeper into the village, they grappled not only with the tactical implications of their movements, but also the psychological burden that accompanied warfare. Major Hale, acutely aware of the limitations of his intel, understood that the hidden tunnels had become a game-changer in the unfolding operation. These subterranean passages, designed by the Germans for both strategic evasion and counter-offensive maneuvers, posed significant challenges for the American troops, who had initially anticipated a swift and linear advance. Unbeknownst to them, the tunnels offered the German defenders an extensive network for retreat and ambush, effectively allowing them to bypass the Americans' overwhelming firepower. In this pivotal moment, the operational dynamics shifted dramatically, influencing both tactical decisions on the ground and the broader strategic picture. Intelligence reports, now viewed through the lens of hindsight, revealed that the village not only acted as a defensive stronghold, but also served as a strategic junction, connecting various fronts that the Germans needed to hold. This realization pressed upon Hale to rethink his approach, urging him to incorporate reconnaissance and diversionary tactics aimed at flushing out enemy combatants hidden away in the labyrinthine tunnels. He quickly assembled a specialized team of scouts and engineers with the dual purpose of further mapping the tunnel system while laying charge traps to deter enemy movement. The situation demanded immediate and robust adaptations. The soldiers found themselves navigating a tactical puzzle where brute force was no longer exclusively applicable. The newly formed scouting units ventured into the labyrinth under the cover of darkness, armed with handheld radios and infrared goggles, as they carefully retraced the contours of the tunnel system. Each step echoed the echoes of history, foreshadowing a violent blossoming of chaos. These men, stepping into the abyss, were acutely aware of their mission: to expose the enemy and neutralize the threats that lurked in the shadows. Hours melted into an eternity as they crawled through dank, claustrophobic corridors, the air heavy with moisture and the metallic scent of foreboding. Meanwhile, above ground, the surviving troops engaged in sporadic skirmishes with the Germans. Ambush positions were established, layering intelligence with cover fire, creating a sense of controlled order amid the chaos of battle. The ground was littered with the remnants of war: spent shell casings, craters riddled with shrapnel, and the inescapable evidence of lives permanently altered or extinguished. With each exchange of gunfire, the stakes escalated further. Regular reports from aides-de-camp informed Hale of the dwindling morale among the ranks. Soldiers, once buoyed by the illusion of inevitability that accompanies early victories, began to palpably sense the weight of their seemingly unyielding struggles. Department of War calculations had not accounted for the resilience shown by opponents entrenched in a familiar geography, a battle-hardened local populace willing to defend their homeland. Desperate to change the narrative, Hale introduced a two-pronged approach, wherein air support from the newly arrived squadrons would work in concert with the infantry's advance. The coordination was meticulous. Aerial bombardments would precede troop movements into identified sectors of German resistance. As bombs fell from the sky with earth-shattering precision, the air erupted like thunderclaps, creating a cacophony of sound that enveloped the senses. Dust and debris swirled, and the once quiet village transformed into a battleground where the moral dilemmas of collateral damage began to surface. Each airstrike intended to pave the way for ground troops unintentionally annihilated civilian structures and transformed residences into smoldering shells of their former selves. The complicated interplay between nefarious and noble objectives rocky and tenuous. It was a fragile dance of honor twisted by tragedy. The operational landscape, now reshaped, also called for heightened sensitivity regarding civilian casualties. Logistical coordination between military factions and local informants became essential in differentiating between enemy combatants and non-combatants, who who paid the highest price in the form of lost homes and shattered dreams. As humanitarian awareness arose, soldiers found themselves negotiating with their own consciences while moving forward. However, the stark realization remained that war had a tumultuous way of stripping away the boundaries of morality, revealing humanity's dark underbelly. The emotional toll on soldiers could not be subdued merely by adhering to the rules of engagement. The fallout loomed large as memories of violence threatened to haunt their nights. Days turned into a grind of tactical advances and intermittent stalemates, the rhythm of the battlefield emphasizing an arduous, protracted ballet of life and death. Major Hale's strategies crystallized into a coherent, although brutal tactical doctrine: leverage mobility, disrupt logistics, and deny sanctuary. As American forces plunged into successive sweeps of the village, probing ever deeper, their efforts were met with ferocity. Each skirmish became more desperate. As casualties mounted on both sides, the specter of exhaustion loomed ominously over the weary soldiers. Yet the mounting losses only intensified the resolve, threading the narrative of collective sacrifice through the fabric of their identities as they forged ahead. Then came the moment of reckoning. A fierce confrontation erupted at the mouth of the largest tunnel. With intelligence suggesting it might serve as the last refuge for the heavily armed Germans, Major Hale sought to breach the enemy's last stronghold. What ensued was more than an engagement. It became a theater of horror where the chasm between life and death narrowed to a lethal pinpoint. Soldiers stormed with weapons drawn, adrenaline surging through veins, blurring the lines between bravery and folly. Grenades were hurled. Gunfire roared. The once silent darkness was punctuated with the explosive sounds of battle, spiraling into a maelstrom that erupted from the bowels of the earth. In that fleeting moment, birth and demise intertwined. Courage and fear played their final hands. Among the dust and smoke, the lines of loyalty were tested, as soldiers wrestled with the enormity of the choices they made. The village, forever marked by this fierce firefight, bore witness to the humanity lost and the legacies forged. Emerging from the fallout of battle, Major Hale, along with his surviving men, grappled with the truths of their endeavor. Victory was a shadow that birthed profound anguish. They had secured the village, but at what cost? The echoes of fallen comrades and the ghosts of civilians lingered long after the thunder of war subsided, proving that no territorial gain could ever truly account for the price paid in blood and memory. Thus, the defining conflict left scars, not only upon the scarred landscape, but deeply embedded within the souls of those who endured the tumultuous tide of history. This battle became a lesson layered in complexity. The consequences of action reverberated long after the smoke cleared, a haunting testament to the indelible impact of war and the heavy burden of memory it etched upon the collective conscience. It underscored a vital truth. In the theater of conflict, every victory carries an unshakable echo of loss, forever tethered to the ghosts of its past. The hidden tunnels did not merely change the course of a mission, they laid bare the intricate complexities of human emotion locked in the fierce struggle for survival. As the sun began to dip behind the skeletal remnants of the German village, casting elongated shadows across the debris-strewn streets, Major Hale's mind churned with urgency. The success of the assault, however costly, was clouded by the unsettling realization that the village was not deserted. It teemed with remnants of the enemy, strategically hidden beneath the surface. The echoes of gunfire still reverberated through the air, but the true battle was only just beginning. The hidden tunnels, an unseen labyrinth of conflict, symbolized both a tactical advantage for the Germans and a haunting dilemma for the American soldiers. With each soldier's breath visible in the autumn chill, a looming sense of unease settled over the unit as they prepared for the next phase of their mission. Confusion reigned in moments of silent reflection, when soldiers were faced with the grim reality that not all the enemy had fled above ground. Military intelligence had grossly underestimated the importance of these subterranean passages. Originally constructed as a means of shelter during air raids, these tunnels transformed into strategic conduits for German troops, permitting rapid redeployment within the village and covert surprise strikes against the advancing American forces. Major Hale, along with his staff, huddled in a hastily constructed makeshift command center within a crumbling farmhouse. Maps, heavy with the fingerprints of hasty scribbles and blood, laid sprawled before him, revealing the web of tunnels that now haunted their plans. The terrain that once seemed unfriendly was now more treacherous than anticipated. He understood the implications profoundly. Every footstep risked alerting an unseen adversary lying just below the surface. In a rapid-fire series of decisions, Hale called for a tactical regrouping. The men were exhausted, haunted by the sights and sounds of fallen comrades, and aware of the rising stakes. Knowing that morale and strength were waning, Major Hale drew upon the spirit of camaraderie fostered over weeks of combat. He spoke of the necessity to clear the village, not just for military strategy, but for the sake of honor and sacrifice. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for those who will never fight again," he declared, an attempt to rekindle the flame of purpose amidst flickering shadows of doubt. With the pivotal knowledge that they faced an embedded and elusive adversary, the American troops adopted a more fragmented approach. Squads were deployed to sweep the village systematically, one building at a time, all while maintaining a wary vigilance for hidden entrance points. It was a slow, methodical maneuver rather than the rapid onslaught they had initially envisaged. Communication and coordination amongst the units were paramount. Signal flares and coded messages dictated the rhythm of movements, punctuated by the distant thud of explosives and the crackling of gunfire. This created a tension laden with suspense, a lingering acknowledgement that death could appear from any crevice. Under the weight of uncertain fate, the battle at the surface toys with the reality below. As the German defenders lay in wait, emboldened by intelligence on American movements, preceding their own actions, these defenders utilized the familiar topography to their advantage, launching counter-assaults from tunnels that paralleled the front line. Major Hale's soldiers experienced the full, unfiltered onslaught of such strategies as hidden combatants emerged from the earth, firing in precision bursts before retreating to the safety of their underground cover. These fleeting confrontations bled fear into the hearts of the approaching American troops, a desperation that intertwined with the confusion made all the more acute by each miscalculated entry. Every room cleared, and every effort exerted came at a personal cost. The soldiers witnessed the remnants of civilian life, testimonials of a humanity ravaged by the beast of war. The grotesque juxtaposition of crushed toys and the air heavy with gunpowder created a haunting backdrop. Each corner turned represented a delicate balance between compassion and aggression. The emotional weight of their mission became increasingly evident. Even as they captured the village block by block, the toll on psychological well-being became apparent. Soldiers grappled internally with the ramifications of their existence in a theater of death, while navigating dangers that were anticipated yet unseen. The whispers of the past echoed in the trenches of Major Hale's mind, punctuated by the specters of doubt and dread as known as his humanity immersed itself in the chaos. What lay below exhausted the determination of his troops, eroded their resolve, and weighed heavily on the ethics of their engagement. Would they forever be remembered as liberators or destroyers? And how fleeting was the line drawn between salvation and suffering? As the air thickened with a smokescreen clouding vision and thought, the men submersed in their tasks wrestled with this existential question, defined not only by what they faced in war, but how they would view themselves upon its conclusion. As hours turned to a grueling night marked by sporadic bursts of violence and darkness, the casualties mounted. Each soldier lost became a palpable reminder of the fragility of life, their teenage laughter now stilled. Resilience morphed into a shared grief woven into the very fabric of their fight. Striking back at the German forces there became both sacrilege and reverence. Each tactical decision harbored an inescapable wave of consequence, another body added to the somber ledger of loss. In this encapsulated horror, the personal stories of bravery and sacrifice morphed into a somber canvas of somber realities, far removed from tales of glory that often accompanied victory. However, as dawn approached, a sliver of resolve ignited within the American forces. understanding that the hidden tunnels symbolized not only a physical threat, but also embodied the very heart of their mission, a mission not solely defined by occupancy of land, but liberating the souls of a people caught in turbulent uncertainty. Major Hale, mobilizing what remained of his company, initiated a final offensive motivated by the knowledge that confrontation could end the torment of an innocent populace. With the lessons of loss stitched into the seams of their spirit, they gathered their fragmented strength and reconstructed their approach into one that combined grit with heart, ready to meet whatever emerged from the dark, a manifestation of humanity's clash amidst the unfurling chains of war. The battle was no longer merely for a village. It was a confrontation for the souls entwined within its confines, and as the sun broke upon the horizon, it was the dawning of an unyielding hope wrapped in the shadows of despair. Thus, amid the rubble of despair and the echoes of anguish, the courage to carry on remained indelibly marked in the mud-stained boots of each soldier, a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who fight, not just against enemies, but for an elusive peace buried deep beneath the wreckage of conflict. As the last remnants of darkness clung to the horizon, the American troops gathered under the flickering light of dawn, their faces a mosaic of determination and weariness. Major Hale stood before his battered company, surveying the motley crew of soldiers who had survived the previous night's inconceivable chaos. Each man bore his own story of loss, fear, and indomitable courage. A profound sense of responsibility choked Hale. Their survival often hinged upon decisions he was compelled to make, each one shadowed by the specter of uncertainty. The intelligence reports had hinted at the possibility of underground tunnels, but nothing could prepare them for the labyrinth that awaited below the village of Kruppenfels, its presence looming ominously just beyond the surface. The American forces were caught in a paradox. Overhead, the blue sky signaled hope, yet underground, mystery and menace thrived like a malignant tumor. The tunnels were remnants of a bygone era, utilized by the locals for defensive measures during previous conflicts. Now, these conduits of concealment held German troops poised to spring a trap that could obliterate any advance the Americans hoped to achieve. As Major Hale addressed his men, the palpable tension in the air was matched only by the weight of their rifles, a grim reminder of the violence they were about to unleash against a determined adversary. In the rapidly fading shadows of early morning light, Hale laid out a strategy that sought to exploit the element of surprise rather than hospitality. The perimeter around Kruppenfels had been sufficiently monitored, yet the presence of the tunnels warranted a shift in tactics. Major Hale decided to deploy a two-pronged approach. While a frontal assault would engage the enemy's attention, a stealthy operational unit would navigate the complexities of the underground passages, aiming to outflank and dismantle the German positions from within. This maneuver was not without significant risk. The soldiers selected for the subterranean assault would place themselves directly in the jaws of the enemy, reliant on their training and the unyielding bond between them. Meanwhile, the soldiers preparing for the frontal assault wrestled not just with their weapons, but with the looming specter of fear, which manifested in furtive glances and clenched fists. A palpable silence enveloped them as they embarked on the treacherous path towards the village. The cacophony of distant gunfire occasionally punctured the stillness, creating an erratic rhythm that was both unsettling and motivating. Among them, Corporal Jenkins, a young soldier recently promoted, clenched his rifle tighter, reminding himself that his service was not merely a choice, but an obligation to protect both his comrades and the unsuspecting villagers enshrined in precarious safety within the confines of Kruppenfels. As the sun broke through the low-hanging mist enveloping the village, illuminating the faded rooftops and broken walls of the once vibrant community, the air thickened with adrenaline. Halting at the village's perimeter, units deployed in their designated formations, their movements crisp and calculated. Simultaneously, the stealth team, equipped with minimal gear to reduce noise, skillfully made their way through an entrance hidden beneath the remnants of an old well. Embracing the dank, earthy air that filled the tunnels, they pressed onward, forcing back the fear of being buried alive as the brigands of war transformed these silent pathways into harbingers of death. a desperate push against the invisible hand of fate that guided them. Within the bowels of the village, the atmosphere shifted markedly as the American soldiers navigated the tunnel's treacherous bends and turns, eerily lit by the flickering glow of flashlights. The very ground seemed to harbor ghosts of the past. Every footfall echoed through the darkness, serving as a reminder that history had interwoven itself within these walls, a tapestry of conflict and survival. The strategizing that had occurred above ground could be repositioned in real time, as distant shouts and orders exchanged between German soldiers filtered through the earthen walls. The American troops pressed forward, encouraged by uncomfortable whispers of urgency that permeated their silence. Each man resolved to interpret their mission's worth in the language of courage. Emerging into a clearing illuminated only by lanterns and the dim flame of spirit, they discovered a makeshift command post, a fortress dwarfed in size yet fortified in purpose. Before they could engage, it became clear. The enemy was utterly unaware, caught off guard by the labyrinthine nature of their surroundings. The attackers hesitated only a moment, knowing that the longer they delayed, the more time they afforded the enemy to prepare. Meanwhile, back in the village, the American infantry's frontal assault initiated without hesitation, a fusillade of gunfire erupting through the streets. The soldiers surged forward, advancing against the fortified structures, their resolve bolstered by the very tragedy that had united their spirits. Each rifle crackled into life as the sounds of warfare amplified around them, revealing positions that had long gone undetected. Major Hale's shouts sliced through the din, urging his band of brothers onward. There was no turning back now. It was amidst this relentless exchange of violence that the duel of philosophies began to unfold. On one side, American forces fighting for liberation amid a shattered landscape. On the other, German troops entrenched in a desperate struggle to retain control over crumbling territory. The essence of human conflict lay bare. Each kill was not just a statistic, but a shattering of lives, a dismantling of identities. In this hemorrhage of warfare, countless tragedies unfolded daily, the weight of individual loss borne silently, yet etched deeply into the memory of every soldier. Engaged in a hellish dance of irony, the Americans pressed closer to the heart of their mission, surrendering lightly to the combat's chaotic energy. The Germans, however, were relentless, fending off each charge with bitter resistance. It became apparent that the tunnels would play a pivotal role in this unfolding nightmare. As the American soldiers closed in, clusters of German reinforcements began to emerge, propelled from hidden entrances, nursing a fierce will to defend their last bastion. The inevitable clash crescendoed. From the sacred embrace of the earth, the Americans and Germans collided, their distinct ideologies igniting like the powder in their rifles. Tactics once driven by meticulous planning now devolved into visceral instinct. The tunnels, supposed channels of stealth and surprise, metamorphosed into a claustrophobic environment where the lines between predator and prey blurred, each strike and counterstrike echoing the cries of a wounded humanity that had become ensnared in war's ceaseless machinery. As the battle raged on, Major Hale remained acutely aware of the lives at stake and the stakes of this insatiable conflict. Every moment churned like the wheels of a machine. Timing became critical, and the decision to either push ahead or retreat was often guided by an ambiguous sense of honor and moral duty. Each soldier was not just fighting for territory. They engaged in a primal struggle for survival, both their own and that of innocent lives, intertwined within the fabric of conflict. Beneath that sinister veil of warfare, it was evident that the true cost would not be summarized simply in victories or defeats. Their tales would ebb and flow beyond the battlefield. This confrontation in the heart of Kruppenfels represented not merely a struggle for dominance, but a desperate hope to unearth the resilience of a human spirit, striving to reclaim life against the backdrop of destruction. As the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the war-torn landscape of Kruppenfels, Major Hale's tactical mind raced with the implications of the unexpected resistance his troops faced. What had begun as a mission to seize an ostensibly abandoned German village had morphed into a brutal confrontation that threatened to unravel the carefully orchestrated plans laid out by Allied command. The discovery of extensive underground tunnels had instigated a shift in warfare dynamics, where the American forces found themselves at a significant disadvantage, navigating a terrain that undercut conventional military strategies. The American men, equipped with the latest in weaponry and technology, were being drawn into a timeless conflict where the raw, primal instinct for survival governed every encounter. The first engagement had come with a barrage of gunfire that echoed off the cobblestones and timber frames of the village's crumbling buildings. The previously empty streets suddenly erupted with German soldiers, emerging ominously from the tunnel entrances scattered throughout. These subterranean passages, initially viewed as an opportunity for a surprise assault, had transformed into a trap. The Germans had prepared well, utilizing the natural geography to their advantage, creating a network of tunnels that could serve as shelters, supply routes, and points of ambush. The psychological effect of being hunted in an unfamiliar space weighed heavily against the Americans, who had anticipated a straightforward advance but now found themselves pawns on a chaotic chessboard. Hale understood that the situation required immediate reassessment and adaptation. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, his soldiers huddled behind crumbling walls, using them as cover while attempting to regroup and strategize. Voices rose and fell as they relayed the information of enemy movements, a cacophony of urgency interspersed with the sounds of gunfire and the sharp report of rifle bullets whizzing past like angry hornets. The American soldiers, although valiant, were not prepared for the tenacity displayed by the German defenders, whose fierce loyalty to their homeland fueled a daunting resistance. The heavy losses faced during the initial skirmishes gnawed at the psyche of Hale and his men, instilling a sense of foreboding that this village would not easily yield to aggression. With a heightened sense of urgency, Major Hale convened a small group of trusted non-commissioned officers to discuss a new tactical plan. They recognized the necessity to exploit the conditions that had been anticipated for a swift victory, while using the very environment that had turned against them to their advantage. It was clear now that brute force alone would not suffice. A calculated application of multifaceted maneuvers would be required to neutralize the hidden threat lurking within the depths of the village. "All we have is time, and we must outsmart them," Hale stated, his voice steady despite the clamor of the battle nearby. "We'll need to establish a flanking maneuver to draw the Germans out. They can only defend a limited number of exits. If we can spread them thin and place fire on multiple tunnel openings, we can force a break." The sergeants nodded, their expressions resolute. To bring this plan to fruition, however, would require extraordinary coordination and communication. Signal flags would replace radio transmissions due to the oppressive nature of underground earthen echoes, which often rendered comms devices practically useless. Artillery support would have to be meticulously calculated, as any misstep could result in collateral damage to both the village and the innocent civilians they never sought to harm. These nuances underscored the weight of their decisions. Every drop of ammunition expended could play a pivotal role in shaping their fate. Emerging from the command tent with a renewed sense of purpose, Hale dispatched squads to strategic points around the village, seeking to bait the entrenched enemy forces. As the night cloaked Kruspenfels with its inky darkness, flares shot upwards, illuminating the silhouettes of buildings and casting long, dancing shadows across the street. The American soldiers prepared to spring their trap, fully aware that they were not only vying for tactical supremacy, but also grappling with the ethical dilemmas of urban warfare. The dichotomy of freedom and oppression loomed heavy over them. They were to liberate, but could inadvertently destroy. When the first shots rang out, the Americans unleashed their plan with urgency. Gunfire erupted like the sound of a violin in fast tempo, each pull of the trigger echoing tales of bravery and peril. Smoke filled the air as flares ignited darkened corners, lighting up the myriad entrances to the tunnels. It was a delicate dance of position and movement, a retreating line of American soldiers drawing forces away from the other exits, allowing a concentrated force to pour fire into one particularly well-defended tunnel entrance. Yet, their tactical brilliance met with the brutal reality of warfare. The Germans, fully aware of their surroundings and prepared for incoming assaults, quickly adapted too, retaliating with relentless precision. The sound of grenades exploding, shrapnel tearing through flesh and fabric, and anguished cries reflected the harrowing price of combat. Culled from the darkness emerged tiny figures, German soldiers clad in the green and gray of their uniforms, emerging from the shadows with practiced efficiency. The tight spaces of the tunnels shifted the dynamics of combat to claustrophobia, forcing both groups into panicked close-quarters confrontations where weapons like rifles and machine guns, sometimes too unwieldy, became nearly useless. As the firefight consumed more lives, a palpable tension threatened to suffocate whatever morale remained. Major Hale's heart sank each time he recorded a casualty, their sacrifices quickly weighing heavily upon him as the specter of failure began to encircle his thoughts. The human cost and the moral ramifications of their mission began to muddy his resolve. These were not just soldiers. They were sons, fathers, and brothers, and with each passing hour, he felt the burden of their fates tighten around him. It was no longer a fight solely between armies. It was a deeply personal confrontation with destiny, where glory and tragedy converged into a singular, breathless expanse of uncertainty. In the following hours, their struggle evolved into a brutal narrative of concession and courage, of what it meant to fight and protect not merely for victory, but for humanity's inherent right to exist, even amid chaos. It was a battle etched into stone, laying the groundwork for the conversations of valor, sacrifice, and the profound intricacies of human connection found in the desperate moments before the dawn of peace. With the echoes of conflict ringing in their ears, both sides fought not for land, but for the remnants of hope that lay buried in the ruins of Kruppenfels, waiting silently for the war to write its final devastating chapter.